And welcome and appreciate you so much for joining me. The Buckeyes head up to Camp Randall to take on the Wisconsin Badgers, led by Luke Fickell, most likely not for long. Luke's got the Buckeyes, then he's got, I think, a bye week, and then he's got Oregon, and then he's probably going to get fired. And that's sad. Obviously, we all wanted it to work out for a Buckeye legend, really. Luke put decade and a half of blood, sweat, and tears, and sometimes it's easy to forget this guy was literally the head coach at Ohio State, obviously on an interim basis, and the season didn't go well. But when they needed him, he stepped up in a situation that was obviously never going to be long-term, and he knew it, and he did it anyway, and he did it with pride, and he did it the best he could, and he went on to Cincinnati and became an amazing head coach, it seemed, at Cincinnati, and we were waiting for him to get his big opportunity. And when he went to Wisconsin, it just felt like that fits like a glove, man. That is a glove right there. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. And he made some blunders early, deciding to go with Phil Longo and a wide open offense, going away from Wisconsin's identity. And a move at the time, I understood what he was trying to do. What he was trying to do was, yes, the Wisconsin identity can build you a 10-2 football team, and you can be powerful and awesome. But when you go up against the best of the best, you're going to lose. You can't win a national championship like that. So if you've got national championship aspirations, you've got to evolve that offense. You got to get a little bit away from the 3 yards in a cloud of dust mentality, the big 360-pound offensive lineman. You got to a little bit. You don't need to go with Phil Longo. And he just went too far away. He went too far away, and he never had the quarterbacks to do it. And to be honest, he's been snake bitten by quarterback luck. Injury first year, injury second year, now in the third year, an injury as well from his transfer from Maryland. He's never really had a chance as far as that goes, but everything's just gone wrong. And I think the biggest problem with Fick is when we look at the roster, man, he's not improved the roster, and he's so puzzled as to why this team, I watch his press conferences every week. He is so puzzled as to why this team can't get it together. I'm looking at these players, and he's just not upgraded the roster at all. And I'm starting to think maybe he just doesn't understand what a top-notch roster looks like, which blows my mind, having spent so much time at Ohio State. But they've got money. They've got the ability to make moves. And the stuff that they did in the offseason, the transfer portal, puzzling. They let 3 of their defensive linemen go to Illinois. They've got money there at Wisconsin. Good money. They got support. That's why they brought him in. But it's going to come to an end. And I kind of hope Ohio State isn't the last team that beats him. I hope they wait a week till it's Oregon. At any rate, enough about Wisconsin. Let's talk about our Buckeyes, as what we like to do before the game is ask 10 questions. 10 questions as to what we're going to see heading into the game. And then in the post-game show, we answer the questions. I tend to do this every week. The post-game show, though, this week, I'm not going to be solo. This week, I'll be here at Buckeye Huddle with Mark on the post-game show. So we'll answer our 10 questions probably on Buckeye Huddle primetime on Monday night. But today we ask the questions as the Buckeyes travel up to Camp Randall. And this is kind of a name your score game to me. There are some folks who are of the opinion that this Wisconsin defense, which gave up 37 points to Iowa, is going to be some kind of test for Ohio State. It's not. The only test for Ohio State as far as how many points they want to put up is Ryan Day. Like whatever he wants to put up, he can put up. They're a 25.5 point favorite now, opened as a 28.5 point favorite. And this team is just hard to gauge because we know they can do whatever they want on the offensive side of the ball in a matchup like this. What do they want to do? Well, they've been wanting to work on things, which I'm all for, man. Work on this running game. Make it great. You don't need to go out and work on things that you already know you can do. But there are some things that I wonder, are you maybe not repping things enough and just expecting that you'll be able to turn it on when you can? Things like tempo. We see very little of it. And there will be a time in this season where you're going to rely on Julian Sayin in this offense to move fast. And they're not repping it at all. That would be something I would like to see them work on a little bit. We look at things like seam balls from Julian Sam, where he's not pulling the trigger on a lot of these and they're open and not even taking shots. I know everybody wants to take shots. Like there's intermediate routes that he's not pulling the trigger on and checking down. I'd like to see him try a little more of that, especially in a game where there's really no consequence. You can turn the ball over a couple times and learn lessons like that, and it's not going to matter. And we've got several of these games coming up. So I expect to start seeing a little more tempo in the next couple of games. I expect to start seeing Julian pull the trigger a little more. And these are things that obviously they've been working a lot on the running game. I think we're going to see a little more. We're going to work on this too at this point in the season. At least I hope so, because I would hate to get in a game in the postseason and they go to click the turbo switch and they're discombobulated because they haven't repped it enough in real live game action. So that said, question number one for me, Julian saying, will he pull the trigger today? The game against Illinois, there weren't as many as there were in the previous game, but against Illinois, not the previous game, what was it? The Washington game, there was probably 4 or 5 balls he could have pulled the trigger on and he chose not to. In the Illinois game, there was probably about 3 or 4 where it looked like, okay, here is an intermediate route that you could have pulled the trigger on and instead you checked it down. Or here is a longer route you could have pulled the trigger on and it looks like you could have gotten it in there. We know your arm, but instead you chose to go with the intermediate route. Will he push the pace a little bit? Will he try to go for those not risky throws, but maybe riskier throws, a little less conservative? And I hope that he does, because again, this is the kind of game, and I think we've got a couple of them coming up, where he can go ahead and take those risks, and the defense will keep these guys so far out in front that it's not going to matter. I want a quarterback who throws some interceptions from time to time. That means he's pushing the pace. He's throwing with anticipation. And it wouldn't bother me at all if he threw a pick trying to squeeze something in there. So will we see Julian pull the trigger a little bit this week? Question number 2, we go to the interior of the defensive line. And there's a couple of questions here. Number 1, Edric Houston, Ryan Day said he was good to go. Now, we saw Edric Houston start off the season rough, lost his starting job. This was a huge surprise to a lot of us. When we came into this year, you had K-Mac and Edric, and I think most of us were under the impression that that was a duo that was even more solid than Kenyatta and Caden Curry. In fact, I did a poll on that. Who are you most comfortable with? Who do you feel the most comfortable with that is going to be the most solid unit on this defensive line? The interior with K-Mac and Edric, or the outside with Caden and Kenyatta? And it was like 75% of Buckeye fans said the inside with K-Mac and Edric. And Edric obviously showed us potential as a freshman. But then Tony Gerdeman brought it up to me. You know, he didn't really show us anything on the field that would make us think he was about to take a big step. And Tony was right. We were kind of going off the profile, the personality, the smarts, everything about Edric that we've seen guys like him in the past kind of take that next step made us think it's just logical that he's going to take this jump. But we were maybe pushing it a little too far, a little too fast to think that. Obviously, he didn't play even the whole season last year on the inside. He moved there after, 4 or 5 games, but he didn't get to play a ton. And I think the expectations a little too high. And I think the lack of talent that the Buckeyes had in the interior, the only reason he was starting, he probably needed a little more time. So he loses his starting role to Ty Malone. Ty Malone comes in. Ty Malone progressively gotten better each week, and that's excellent to see. But Edric, in his last game that he played, got way better. It was the best game that he played, and the Ohio game was terrible. Come back after the Ohio game, he plays a really, really good game, and then he's injured. And Edric is out. Now, Edric comes back. Do we see him continue that progression, or do we see another game like Ohio? This will be question number 2 for the day. Edric Houston, and then we go to Ty Malone. Question number 3, Ty Malone, will we see continued improvement from Ty Malone? It's been every single game better and better, and this is exciting because I got to say, man, I remember me and Dylan Davis were talking about this. It was the preseason last year, heading into 2024, how excited we were for the potential of Ty Malone. And then he comes out, remember early on in the season in the Marshall game, he showed out. And it was like, man, we got one here. And then the rest of the year, not so much. It's okay, this guy's not ready. And it felt like that again at the beginning of this year. And then it started to get a little better and a little better. And this game against Illinois was his come out game. I mean, he was on top of it, made several tackles, and it's pretty exciting and will lead to question number 4. Will we see continued improvement from Will Smith as well? Because Will Smith is the number 2 interior defensive lineman. Of all these guys, he has performed the second best behind Caden McDonald. And I am so excited for this kid. Obviously, a legacy. Those my age and older loved his dad. And seeing Will Smith Jr., who when he was recruited, a lot of people thought was just kind of a legacy recruitment and not somebody who was really going to end up making an impact at Ohio State. I thought he was a really good recruit, better than he was being given credit for. Really, really twitched up and quick. But then when he got to Ohio State, it felt like, okay, maybe he's not going to end up turning out to be the player I thought he was going to be. And it really drove it home when Larry Johnson switched him from 3 tech to 1 tech. Obviously, he's not very big. So moving him to 1 tech was like, okay, that means he's not quick enough to compete at 3 tech was my thinking. So I wasn't feeling great this summer when rumors were floating that Will Smith Jr. was taking a step. I was really seriously doubting that was true. I thought it was just a little bit of hype. Will Smith Jr. took a big step. Will Smith Jr. is solid as heck to very good. Like, he is on the precipice of being something really special at Ohio State. And I think that what the best lineup we could see on the inside right now is if we could see him back at 3 tech, if we could see K-Mac and him together, because there are no rules on this defensive line. We've seen that already. They move everywhere. They're all playing every position. I want to see Will Smith Jr. with K-Mac. That's what I want to see. Those are the 2 best. At any rate, when he gets his snaps, he's excellent. I'm hoping to see him make a big play. So Will Smith Jr., will we see continued improvement for him? And that brings us to number 5. Kenyatta Jackson had himself a week, buddy. Had himself a week. Kenyatta has played very good quietly this year. He's not gotten the accolades that Caden Curry has. Caden's being used a little differently. Kenyatta is so good in the run game. He is so good at containing that he has been asked to do it. And obviously it's helped the defense tremendously. He talked to Matt Patricia. He talked about this on Wednesday's press conference, that he talked to Matt Patricia and he wants to showcase his stuff. He wants to showcase that he is a pass rusher. And I've heard a lot of people say Kenyatta hasn't really been good this year. Kenyatta's been a bit of a letdown this year. I don't think that's the case at all. And you can see the way he's playing that they're not letting him go. He said Matt Patricia agrees with him and they're going to start letting him go. Now is the test here. What do we see out of Kenyatta? We might see it instantly, because the Kenyatta that we all thought we were going to get in the offseason, an absolute monster, has been there all along in the run game. Will we see it pass rushing? I'm really excited to find out, because now that we have confirmation from Kenyatta, who said literally, and this is something we've talked about for years, right? Caging. He literally said those words, I'm okay with caging, but it's like, okay, they've been holding him back. Let's see Kenyatta go. So very excited about what we see about Kenyatta. And then we've got Zion time. Ziggy Grady, baby. He is now the clear number 3 or 4 on the defensive ends. And this is a kid, all the potential in the world, freshman out of Alabama, true freshman, got the size, got the twitch. He can definitely be a dude at Ohio State. I think he will be. And we're seeing a little more. And every time we see him on the field, he seems to make a play. I think every time he's been in at the end of the game, he's made a play. Even early on in the game against Ohio, I believe it was the game that he made had a good sack. But I think we're about to start seeing more and more snaps for him, as Bo Atkinson has not been great. I don't think he's been as good as maybe some of us thought he might be coming in from North Carolina. He's been solid. Logan George, I don't think he's ready. He's maybe gotten 18, 20, 22 snaps on the year so far. He was injured early, but then he got 9 snaps, and I think 5 snaps. So Zion Grady clearly above him on the depth chart. So Bo Atkinson, Zion Grady, your 3rd defensive end coming in after Kenyatta, after Curry. I think we're going to start seeing a little more of a lean to Zion Grady. And that'll be question number 6. Really looking forward to that. Will we see more Zion Grady? If we do, how's he going to look? Lorenzo Styles, clean bill of health. Last week against Illinois, Jermaine Matthews moving down to nickel and Devin Sanchez coming in at corner and replacing Jermaine Matthews at corner looked tremendous. They made a ton of plays. It looked awesome, but they were limited in what they could do. Lorenzo Styles gives them a little more flexibility right now. And Lorenzo has played really, really good this year. We've not seen him against a lot of really good slot receivers. We could have seen it last week as Illinois' best receiver was their slot, but we've not seen him against good slot receivers. The one time we did see them kind of try to pick on him was against Ohio, and we saw the long touchdown. This is the concern about him. Everything else, he's been stellar. In fact, in the run game, he looked really good last game he played. And I'm curious to see where this goes, because there probably is a lot of the fan base right now that would like to see this thing stay with Jermaine at nickel, Devin in there at corner. And I get it. That's the more sexy option. It's certainly more exciting. I do want to see Devin get more snaps. He had a rough-ish game, his first game, and that's perfect. Like, that's exactly what you want. A guy with that kind of talent and that kind of drive to have kind of a rough game. He made some plays, but he had some plays that, he's going to want to learn from, and that's great. You want that. So Devin's going to be a star. There's no doubt about that. Absolute no doubt about that. We'd like to see a little more of him. Maybe they do a little bit of a rotation where they move that down, bring Lorenzo out and play the way they played against Illinois, and start maybe just having that as a different package, just to get Devin in outside of the dime package, to bring him in the standard base defense. So Lorenzo, what do we see out of Lorenzo? Question number 7, I think we're at 7. I always lose count here. The third option receiver. Do we continue to see the third option receiver get some run, which we did not early in the season? The last 2 games we have. The last 2 games, 2 games ago, combined, I think we saw 8 receptions out of the duo of Max Clare and Brandon Inniss. And this is kind of the duo that I consider our third option receiver. It's these 2 combined, because there clearly is no slot receiver present in this offense. And I don't think, look, Brandon Inniss has been getting a ton of crap, man. A ton of crap. I'm telling you, the guy is open. The guy could have had 2 touchdowns if Julian pulled the trigger against Illinois. Some of the passes I'm talking about that he's not pulling the trigger. Inniss is getting open. The balls aren't going Inniss's way. And that's just what it is. He is getting open. I also want to show you this picture. This is Inniss running down away from the team to go interact with the fans who traveled to Illinois. This dude is awesome. And I will not tolerate this Inniss slander any longer. I get it. Everyone wants to see sexy production out of that position. And Mylan Graham is an elite athlete, way better than, not way better. He's better than Inniss. He's definitely, like, if you had to pick one guy, you're going to pick Mylan Graham. There's more that goes into it than that. And I do want to say Inniss, his blocking ability, but man, he did terrible blocking against Illinois, as did everybody, which we'll get into in a minute. But that third production, that third receiver, which to me is that duo, do we continue to see more? So we saw like 8 catches out of them 2 games ago. Last game, we saw 7 catches out of the 2 of them. Do we continue to see that? I think you need that. Early on in the season, it was more like 4. And I think you need to develop that third option, whether that's Claire or Inniss, whoever's in there, so they can draw some attention away from the big boys. So do we continue to see that? Now we go to the tight ends. And my goodness, man, Ryan Day was asked earlier this week, are you getting what you want out of 12 personnel, 12, 13 personnel? Actually, the way the question was phrased, I appreciate it. It was Bo Jackson and CJ Donaldson's best runs came out of 11 personnel. Are you getting what you want out of 12 and 13 personnel? And Day said, yeah. He talked about, the surfaces. When you add more tight ends, you create more gaps. You challenge them how they're going to play it, and then you counter off of what they're going to play it, and you add this new dimension to the game. I liked it when they started off the season with all these tight ends. I thought it was cool. I was loving Keenan Bailey. We came into the year thinking, man, we got the deepest tight end we've ever had. Now we're halfway through the season, and it's clear that this wasn't just a thing that they were messing with and tooling around with. This is who they want to be this year. They want to be this all year long. And by this, I mean like the gluttony of tight ends on the field almost at all times is very, very different. And these tight ends aren't as good as we thought they were. We'll put it that way. Bennett Christian has been very poor this year blocking. He's just been poor. He's getting a lot of run. Will Kazmarek, who is, when he's an inline blocker, he's good. But what they're doing with all these tight ends, they're having difficult. So they're bringing more defenders up, right? And they're having difficulty IDing who they're blocking. And when they're pulling, they're having difficulty IDing whose man is who. That's why we saw Max Clare not block that. Remember Jeremiah came or got blown up when Clare and Cervell went out. That was Clare's block. And that's just a very obvious example you can see very easily. That was Clare's obligation to block him. He didn't. But that's happening on so many of these run plays when they're pulling, when they're moving, when they're leading up through the hole. They're not blocking the right guy. They're not offensive linemen. And what they're doing by adding all these tight ends is taking these defenders that would otherwise be out here on wide receivers and bringing it all in here. So now instead of relying in the run game on your 5 offensive linemen to make their blocks, you're now relying on your 5 offensive linemen and your couple of tight ends to make their blocks. And the odds that the offensive linemen, 5 of them are going to make their blocks, are this percentage. The odds that these 2 extra guys, now you got 7. Well, the odds are there's going to be a breakdown somewhere, and one breakdown kills the play. It's not looking good. It's looking clunky. And Ryan Day said this week in his press conference, we have to, work on the things that we know they can get better at. And then some things that, aren't going to work, we just need to let go. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically that's what he said. My hope is it's some of the run game with this heavy tight ends because it's just clear it was a debacle against Illinois. I mean, an absolute debacle. There were so many run plays where it's like people are ragging on the running backs. It was not their fault. It really wasn't. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, James Peoples, CJ Donaldson, these are very average backs. They're just average backs. They're both in the, if you 200 and out of 280 backs that qualify for a certain amount of carries at the 20% of the average, right? So if the average back at this point has 100, let's say if you got 20 or more carries, 280 of them, CJ Donaldson is number 258 in yards after contact. That big old back, like that's what Ryan Day wants. Yards after contact. He even mentioned it again this week. He's not getting it from CJ Donaldson. James Peoples not much better, ranked in the 200s in that category. Bo in the top 25 for comparison. The gap between Bo and those guys is massive. However, it isn't all their fault. Most of those plays, most of them were an issue with blocking, with IDing, and with these tight ends, it confuses the linemen even more with their IDing because now they got a whole nother set of issues here. So it's just not, when everybody says the offense is looking clunky, that is specifically what it is. It's these tight ends, it's IDing, it's them missing blocks, and it's them throwing the offensive lineman off just a little bit here and there. One guy breaks down and the whole play's busted. So I hope that we see a pivot from this a little bit. In the passing game, when you got Will Kazmarek and Max Clare, it's fine. It's great. It looks good. But in the running game, the gluttony of tight ends, will we continue to see it against Illinois? And I wish that I had the stats, what percentage of the game they are running 12 or 13 personnel versus 11, which every time they pull up 11 personnel, when you're watching that all 22, it's like, thank goodness. And it seems like everything goes right. Looks like a normal Ryan Day offense. So tight ends, question number 7 or 8, wherever we're at. Let's call it question number 9, because this is my final question. Ohio State's freshman class of 2025 featured something like 24, 25 guys. And I started my show in the off season after the Missouri game, after the Cotton Bowl. I started my show. that meant the entirety of me starting the show till last year started was essentially a daily show where I had not much to talk about but recruiting, which is no problem. I love talking recruiting. And I got like so involved in the recruiting class of 2025, more than I've ever been in my life because of the show. And I got to know a lot of the guys in the class before they even committed to Ohio State. And it's just a class that I will always just really love. I mean, like, I love this freshman class at Ohio State, but none more than Isaiah West. I mean, this kid is the personality of Emeka Egbuka, a 27, 28-year-old up here, like just the maturity of a grown man and the work ethic of a grown man driven to get something. Also, the single most undervalued prospect in that class as a 3-star who is committed to Kentucky. And here's how fine the line is. Here's how fine the line is in recruiting. If Carlos Loughlin, if Tony Alfraud doesn't leave for Michigan and Ryan Day doesn't bring in Carlos Loughlin, who had a pre-existing relationship with Isaiah West is a freshman down at Kentucky. They're going to win 2 games this year. Their coach is going to get fired. Instead, Carlos Loughlin knows him and brings him to Ohio State for a visit, which at that visit, Isaiah West knew immediately, I'm coming to Ohio State. And now he is about to get run as a true freshman at Ohio State for the number 1 team defending national champs instead of being at Kentucky. That's how fickle recruiting is. And I'm so happy for him. Like I said, absolutely wonderful kid. I've had him on the show. Just love him. But now we look at this backfield. I think he was the single most undervalued prospect in that class as a 3-star, the number 798 prospect in the class. And I reviewed his film on the show and showed everybody, like, this guy, this was a big thing. I was so irritated that he was a 3-star 792 and they wouldn't rank him higher after the senior season was just so tremendous. And they did the re-rankings. He didn't move up. And I was just mad about it, and I shouldn't be, but I am. Anyway, at the time, this kid is going to be a fan favorite, as I was saying. Like, would you just look at the way he runs? When we talk about physicality, his style, despite weighing less than Bo weighs 224 now. Isaiah, about 5'10". He told me he was 205 just about a week and a half ago. 210. So he's 210, but the way he runs, the physicality, the burst, he's not a top end burner like Bo. He's not going to pull away for long chunk yardage. But what CJ Donaldson is being tasked with, bringing him in on these short yardage carries, Isaiah West, I believe, would be way more successful in that role, despite weighing less. In addition, he gives you a lot more on other areas of the field as a total back than CJ Donaldson does. So my question is, do we see Isaiah West this week? If we do, how does he do? Fingers crossed that we do. I am of the belief that if we see him get a couple of series, just an opportunity in a couple of series, everybody is going to say, that's the guy, man. Leave the big guy that runs into the behind of the center and falls down on the bench. We want number 32. 32 is the dude. So those are our questions heading in to review. We have got interior defensive line, Edric, bounce back, time alone, Will Smith, continued improvement, Kenyatta Jackson, will we see him rush the passer? Zion Grady, time to emerge, baby. Lorenzo Styles, will he play? Will he play well? Will they switch and do what they did last week with Jermaine at nickel and Devin at corner? The third option receiver, will we continue to see that guy get about 8-9 catches? 13 personnel. Will we see less tight ends, please? Will Julian pull the trigger on some of those 20-yard seam routes? And finally, Isaiah West. Does Isaiah get his shot this week at Illinois? Hopefully so. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us at Buckeye Huddle today. Please join us for the post-game show. Look, we're loaded up tomorrow. Loaded up. We've got Tom, Tony, Kevin out in Camp Randall. I'm sure they'll do a nice long pregame show. The post-game show, I'll be with Mark Givler, and then we will click it to the press conferences, and then it'll go to Tom and Tony. Going to be a delightful day tomorrow. The game's at 3:30. By the way, over at Juck on Bucks, if you're interested, I stream all game long over at Juck on Bucks. So I'll be live on the air. If you are alone and you want to watch the game with somebody, come watch it with me. Don't watch me with your family around. I'll annoy them like I annoy my own, which is why I watch it on stream with my Buckeye family. So appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Check out.